may be important in your personal life, it may not be, I don't know.
Okay, I'll write that.
No one seems to know this, but Amazon?
OMG, really? No one knows this.
Did you get your Spotify Wrapped? Do you use Spotify?
I don't use Spotify.
Apple Music?
Nope. I don't have any music to use.
All of these are
YouTube?
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that
like
might
the titles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep thinking I should, but I never do. It's just one of those things of, I try and have as few expenses as I possibly can.
That's fair. I wouldn't have it if it weren't for the student discount.
I couldn't help much. Okay, so today is our last class. You have your exam coming up next week sometime, I can't remember the date. I think it's on Thursday, but I'm not entirely certain. It's listed in Canvas, so y'all should know. Hopefully you'll have all submitted your papers, your final papers. Those were due on Tuesday at midnight. Are there any other questions at all? All right. So what we're going to be discussing today is deep ecology. We've looked at more traditional forms of environmental ethics. And the traditional forms typically utilize existing ethical structures in order to assess what is environmentally appropriate or inappropriate. So as an example, Taylor's biocentrism relied heavily on Kant's deontologic theory. Ecocentrism was kind of in a gray area. I would probably argue that it was influenced by Kant's theory. We also have the traditional utilitarian theory of the greatest good for the greatest number, which is usually utilized for animal rights. Arnie Nass's deep ecology goes in a very new direction. It's not using any existing ethical framework, it's creating its own. And this is why it's largely considered an alternative environmental ethic, or it's not a contemporary traditional, I guess you could say, traditional environmental ethic. This is Arnie Nass. Oh, wait. Hey. You're not working. There we go, that's Arnie Nass, right there. Arnie Nass was a great mountaineer. He was a Norwegian philosopher. He did a lot of work in logic. He's a very, very impressive, influential man. I mean, don't you just like him? It's like looking at him, I like him.
What would you do if you saw him in the woods like that?
I'd be like, hey, how's it going, man? You're communing with nature. I think he's cool. So, holism, is, as understood through deep ecology, recognizes how every living thing is interconnected with every other living thing in the world. Nothing can be separated out from this web of interrelationships. We're all completely connected. The concept of what Arnie Nass calls self-realization And when he writes self-realization, he always emphasizes, or I'm sorry, always capitalizes the S in self-realization as a way to remind you that the self, as in ecological terms, is not this fixed entity. The self is, in ecological terms, is much more akin to the Buddhist ideas of self, which is in flux, is flowing. There is nothing permanent about us. Everything is always changing inside of us. The person that was brushing your teeth this morning is not the same person that is sitting here right now. Because everything that makes you up, your physical form, your mental processes, your ideas, your thoughts, your feelings, have completely changed. They are no longer the same. As an example of how we are connected with the non-human world, this is what is required of us every single day. We have to consume, 550 liters of oxygen every day. We have to consume 3 liters of water, 1.5 to 2 kilos of food every single day. All of this material, the oxygen, the water, the food, is what makes us up. All the biological processes that you've learned about, the Krebs cycle and TCA cycle and all those things, all of that material that makes up you as a person came from outside of your body. And you are expelling parts of yourself every single day. When you breathe out, when you sweat, when you go to the bathroom, you are shifting things from being inside of you, part of you, to being outside of you again. There's this fuzzy boundary between your skin and yourself. Who you are is not, from a deep ecological perspective, who you are is not bound by your skin at all. You are constantly in flow, you are interacting with the world around you. So Arnie Nass is arguing against what he calls the shallow ecology movement. He is arguing in favor of the deep ecology movement. So he's contrasting that with the shallow ecology movement. And what shallow ecology is what we think of as basic environmentalism. It is the fight against pollution and resource depletion. The central objective is the health and affluence of people in the developed countries. This is basically what environmentalism has come to be. We are fighting against pollution, resource depletion, but we are avoiding at all costs any harms to the health and affluence of ourselves. It's very self-focused. It doesn't really go beyond our personal benefit, our personal health. The contrasting against this is what Arnie Nass is arguing in favor of, which is the deep ecology movement. The deep ecology movement is made up of 7 basic points, which we'll go through, and then there's also, in addition to 7 basic points, there's the deep ecology platform, which has 8 points. So it's a little confusing. But the deep ecology movement itself is made up of 7 basic ideas, and the platform is related to these, but goes a little bit beyond them. The platform has 8 points. So the first one that of the deep ecology movement is the rejection of the man and environment image in favor of the total field image. Organisms as knots in the biospherical net or field of intrinsic relations. I'm going to go through this piece by piece here. What's the man and environment image? What do you think that means? So according to NAS, I mean, you've all read the article, so according to NAS, what does that mean?
Makes me feel like it's making that separate from the environment.
Precisely, yes. What this idea is it's a pervasive thought within our culture. It's almost as if we are an alien species that has been set down, plopped down in this environment, and we don't have any real relations to it whatsoever. It's separate from us, it's distinct from us. And we simply use it as resources or for materials and things like that. We're not connected to it all. It says instead of this, we need to favor the relational total field image. Look at the total field. Look from above. There's another philosopher who refers to this as the view from above. Imagine yourself from an eagle's perspective, flying through the sky. And you're looking down on everything that's going on. You can see all of the connections, all of the relations that occur between the individual and the environment that surrounds them. We are organisms as knots in the biospherical web or net of intrinsic relations. So as going back here to this, all of these different energy streams are coming into us, are going out of us. We are the solar energy that is feeding the plants, that we consume, that is feeding the plants that the animals that we eat consume. All of these different ideas, we are connected to everything else in this intrinsic relationship. An intrinsic relationship, as R.D. Nass describes it, is a relation between two things, A and B, such that the relation belongs to the definitions or basic constitutions of A and B, so that without the relation, A and B are no longer the same things. The way that I understand this, the way that this makes sense to me, is to think of termites. Termites are really funky because you have termites, they eat wood and all that other stuff. Termites can't actually consume wood. It's impossible for them to consume wood. What they do is they eat the wood, and then the bacteria that's in their gut processes that and provides them the food and the energy that they need to survive. When termite larvae emerge from the eggs, they are not infected with this bacteria. And so what has to happen is one of the adult termites has to regurgitate some of this bacteria, and the larva will consume it, and they will infect themselves with the bacteria, and they can continue to live. The termites could not live without the bacteria. The bacteria cannot live without the termites. It is an intrinsic relationship. It is a dependent relationship for both of them. Without that relationship, neither the bacteria nor the termite could be the same thing. We are very similar to that. Without the relationships that we have with the external world, with the world around us, we would not be the same thing. And these are also relationships not only physical, physiological, but they're also emotional and intellectual. There have been countless reports that have demonstrated that people that do not have ready access to the natural environment are mentally harmed. They have things like depression, they have all sorts of different mental afflictions. And similarly, there have been other reports that have demonstrated that people who can regularly go out into the non-human world benefit mentally, emotionally from that connection. In this respect, we are comprised of these relationships. If we did not have these relationships, we would not be the same thing. Second one, biospherical egalitarianism in principle. These are a lot of challenging words if you've never seen them before. But if you look at them, you can break them down fairly easily. What is biosphere? What is the biosphere? Perfect answer.
Isn't it like basically the whole Earth?
Close. You're on the right track.
Technically, it's like the surface of Earth, but
Yeah.
isn't the biosphere just basically the realm surrounding the realm of Earth that supports life?
Yeah, it's all living things,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it is the whole Earth, but it's not necessarily the rocks and the streams and things. It's just this little band of Earth, of this little band that extends down into the soil and goes up into the sky that supports life. It's all life that exists. So biospherical, we got the biosphere. What's egalitarianism? It is the opposite of elitism.
It's like exactly equal.
Yes, exactly. So what will be biospherical egalitarianism then?
All life is equal.
Perfect. All life is equal. All life is just as important, is just as relevant, just as important as any other life. Why would this only be in principle, though?
Because it's not how we live.
You're right, it isn't. But can we live that way? Yeah, Griffin.
Oh, I don't think we can, because it's like all alive, like, I guess our cells are alive, and I don't know, it's not really, I go like this, I'm counting a bunch of cells, so that's not very equal or fair, but I just did it.
Yeah.
Well, it seems very ambiguity. Like it seems you have to like really, because biospherical egalitarianism is like a very general thing at first. I think you would have to like go and like deep dive in like how to define things, how to like make things in a way that would be practical in a sense.
Yes, and it's not, I mean, living this way is literally impossible. Because as he says, any any way of life, any praxis necessitates some killing, exploitation, and suppression.
There's nothing like we can eat that doesn't require killing something.
Yes, even if you are strict vegan,
Well,
you
you're
are
still-
killing things.
You're still killing animals, you're still killing plants.
Yeah, plants.
Well, it's like animals indirectly, but yeah, but you're still killing plants,
And I mean, so it's an idea. It's something that we should aim for. We should look at it and say that, yes, this is a great idea. I do have to live. I do have to survive. And in surviving, I have to kill. I should try to minimize that as much as I possibly can. But realize that, yes, all life is important. All life is, I hesitate to say this, but is a miracle in existence. I have on my reading list this philosophical argument of how life emerged from non-life. What happened? When life first emerged on Earth, you had all of this non-life. Just all these chemicals, all of these compounds. And then suddenly something happened. And life emerged. What was that? What happened to make that occur? Because by definition, life cannot come from non-life. I cannot take this table here and make it spark into life. So what happened? It's amazing to think about. Everything has the equal right to live and blossom. You will probably recognize this as being similar, if not identical, to what Paul Taylor was saying about with teleological centers of life. That every living thing has a telos, and that we ought to respect this telos. It says the restriction of this principle of an equal right to live and blossom, the restriction of this principle to humans is blatant anthropocentrism. It has detrimental effects on humans themselves, even. If we did not have flourishing life around us, we would suffer. If life was not blooming and flourishing, it would be detrimental to our physical, our psychological, our intellectual well-being. As an example, think of the way you feel in spring, when all life is starting to just come back again after hibernation. Flowers are blooming, birds are singing. That feeling that you experience as you're walking out of doors demonstrates how we need this. We need life to live and blossom. We have deep pleasure and satisfaction from close partnership with other forms of life. For those of you who have pets, think about how much joy and satisfaction they provide to you. It is this close partnership that we have with other forms of life. We were looking at Aldo Leopold on Tuesday, and the book, Sand County Almanac, the first half of it is him describing what is going on his farm throughout the year. He has the chapters broken down into January, February, March, April, May. And he's talking in January about following this skunk track. He's just noticed that a skunk had walked through the snow, and he's following this track. And he is seeing other tracks crossing a track of a squirrel, no, I'm sorry, not a squirrel, of a field mouse. And he's seeing the labyrinth that these field mice have made underneath the snow, so the snow's kind of melting a bit. And he's relating this connection that he has, this partnership and understanding that he has with other forms of life. These aren't his pets that he has, but he still has that connection and partnership with life, with the struggle for existence. This also will want to kind of dog-ear this as well for looking at principle 3 of the deep ecology platform. This has relevance for what we'll look at with principle 3. Okay. The principles of diversity and symbiosis. Diversity enhances the potentiality of survival and the chances of new forms emerging and existing. We discussed the peppered moth briefly in this class, that because of the diversity of the peppered moth, it was able to survive the pollution of London and its consequent cleanup of that pollution. It's another example of how diversity increases the potentialities for survival. Well, actually, I can think of two. The Irish potato famine. The Irish potato famine, which killed thousands of people, only affected one type of potato. But it just so happened to be the only potato that the Irish were farming. If the Irish had been farming 2, 3, 4 other varieties of potato, the potato famine would have never happened. Similarly, years ago, there was a breakout of what's called the grassy stunt virus. And the grassy stunt virus affected rice. It was killing rice. Unfortunately, all rice is more or less identical. And so all rice on Earth was doomed for failure. But it just so happened that there was discovered this form of wild rice that was immune to the grassy stunt virus. And rice crops were able to survive because of that. If that one form of wild rice did not exist, if we had not discovered that, we would have been in a global famine because the majority of the world's population relies on rice as a principal substance in their diet. Survival of the fittest should be interpreted in the sense of the ability to coexist and cooperate in complex relationships, rather than the ability to kill, exploit, and suppress. Live and let live is a more powerful ecological principle than either you or me. Who said survival of the fittest?
Was it Herbert Spencer?
Yes! I'm impressed. Most people say Darwin. No, Darwin never said that. That's Herbert Spencer. Okay? Herbert Spencer was an economist who was trying to justify basically only the strong survive in economics. Okay? What Darwin was actually saying was more akin to survival of the fit-ins. those that fit in to the ecosystem the best are the ones that are going to survive. Those that do not completely foul their nest and destroy what they need to live are going to survive. This also relates to the diversity of human ways of life, of cultures, of occupations, of economies. Languages are increasingly dying out. There are lots of native languages that are being lost. And some people are very concerned about this because a language is more than a method of communication. A language is a way of understanding the world that we live in. There are lots of words in languages that cannot be translated into English. It's impossible to translate into English. In philosophy, for example, there are lots, and ancient philosophy, there are lots of words that we try to translate, but we're not really all that effective with. Word eudaimonia is frequently translated as happiness, but there are a lot of people, myself included, who feel that is a very poor translation. That a better translation is flourishing. The term that is usually used, that is usually translated as virtue, when we talk about virtue ethics, has a second meaning. The term is arete, has a second meaning of excellence. And that's a very useful thing to keep in mind when you're reading virtue ethics. There are things like the Tao in Taoism, which cannot be adequately expressed. So this diverse ways of human life, of cultures, of occupations, of economies, of languages, are necessary. With homogeneity, if everyone thought and acted like we do, this world would be incredibly boring, if you think about it. There would be no need to travel anywhere because you've already seen it. Or the anti-class posture. This is made up of three basic principles. The principle of diversity, which we've already discussed. Diversity does not imply hierarchy. Just because things are different does not mean one is better or worse than another. This, again, goes back to the principle of ecological egalitarianism. All things are ecologically equal. Every organism in an ecosystem plays a role in that ecosystem's health. And every organism within that ecosystem is necessary and important for that ecosystem to remain healthy. And the principle of symbiosis. The principle of symbiosis is basically that the close association or interaction of two distinct organisms, two different species of organisms, that is mutually beneficial for both organisms. So, looking at coral reefs. Coral reefs are excellent examples of symbiosis. The coral is providing food and protection for the organisms that live in it, and those organisms are in turn providing resources for the coral. Number 5, the fight against pollution and resource depletion. This is identical to what shallow ecology is focused on, but there's also the realization that sometimes this fight should not be won at the cost of, or pursued at the cost of other priorities.
What would some other priorities be?
That is an excellent question. What I've been standing here debating, whether or not discussing, is Earth first. And Earth first is always spelled with an exclamation point at the end. The person who created Earth first, Dave Foreman, recently died about a year ago, maybe two. Their motto is no compromise in defense of Mother Earth. They have been labeled eco-terrorists because they will do things like they will burn down buildings. Let's say there's a condo that's being built in a national forest. They will go there and they will burn it to the ground. One of their central books is a field guide to monkey wrenching. That explains ways in which to engage in direct resistance of environmental damage and ways to do it without getting caught. Another thing that Earth First does rather frequently are tree spiking, where they will take these really long nails and drive them into the trunk of trees that are set to be logged. And this is dangerous for the people that are trying to cut down the trees, because if you have a chainsaw going through and all of a sudden it hits one of those nails, chain will break off, will fly off. Also, when they fell these trees and they take them to be processed at the lumber yard, they put them on this lathe that will smooth them out and make them into perfect cylinders. This blade that they use, if that blade hits one of these nails, that blade will chip and be destroyed and can no longer be used. Little bits of that blade will also fly off too. Another thing that they do is they will put sugar in gas tanks of logging trucks, or they will put rice in the radiators of these trucks to basically make them unusable. So the priorities are we do need to fight against pollution and resource depletion, but some priorities like safety and health might be more important. Any other questions? Now, whether or not Earth Firsters are indeed terrorists or not is open for discussion. They don't target people. They aren't attacking anyone. They are just attacking physical objects.
Is it like people, like even like companies, like if people do something like so-called ecological terrorists, they'll label them that so that they'll say, look at these crazy people, they're doing something awful, we gotta stop them.
Yes, because if you have the label ecological terrorist, people automatically think negative things about you. When perhaps the only thing that you've done is you pour sugar in the gas tank of a logging truck. That's not, no one's harmed in that, no one is killed in that. You've just basically destroyed a logging truck.
Like technically still does cause harm to somebody. Financial harm, livelihood.
Financial harm perhaps, but
But,
they can
yeah.
still survive.
Yeah.
But not, you know.
It's not like mixing potassium nitrate into their gas tank. Causes other issues. But,
And are you causing that financial harm to a person or like a corporation?
like technically, depending on the scale of the logging company. Like it's.
I don't know if there are a lot of mom and pop logging
No.
companies.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, like,
But you're affecting people even if it's a corporation.
Yeah.
Because that corporation is a group of people to
Yeah.
an extent. And some of them are forced into those situations to work for those corporations because they have no other options.
That's true.
And so, like, especially like logging companies and like a lot of these like labor intensive jobs, since they don't necessarily always require a lot of education, it's usually people that don't have the ability to get a higher education, or they live in certain areas that they have to do these sorts of jobs. And so, I mean, it's kind of, it's a hard balancing act, because you have to really think about, yes, you are destroying an idea, but you are affecting possibly a lot of people, depending on how you're going about it.
There was an excellent article that was written in response to a bumper sticker that used to be really popular. And the bumper sticker said, do you work for a living or are you an environmentalist? And that was basically in defense of loggers and saying that, you know, these are people's livelihoods that they are trying to survive. And it, like I said, this article was amazing, it was really good. These are the questions that environmental ethics leads to.
to be fair, I would sound like you was a little bit different than nails.
Well, I actually had a friend who did a tree set. Actually fell out of the tree and died, but yeah.
See, what I would do is I'd find saplings and just put a couple large, like penny washers around them. So that way, you know, as they grow around it, and so that way it's not apparently obvious, and so it's when you're cutting, that's where the damage happens.
But see, when you go engage in tree spiking, you usually plant a sign that says, warning, these trees have been spiked.
Yeah.
So people know that wood is now useless for them.
Then it comes the mind game of like you just put that on random trees, and it's like, is it actually spiked?
It's fun.
I also really think about people who put, it was tar mixed with glass and sand around the trunks of trees. Just so when they tried cutting it, it would just dull.
Interesting, I haven't heard that. I wonder if that would affect the health of the tree now. Alright, sorry, next principle, complexity, not complication. Actually, let's go back. What do you think is the difference between these two, complexity versus complication?
Complication involves or implies a problem, but complexity is just like diversity.
Okay, I like that. Okay. Organisms and ways of life, interactions with biosphere in general, indicate complexity. Complexity is a multiplicity of more or less lawful interacting factors operate together to form a unity or a system. It's beautiful, it interacts, it works lovely together. It is this beautiful system. When you look at the complexity of cellular life, everything that's going on around it, all of the interactions that it has, it's beautiful. Complication, the best way that I can describe this is, how many of you do your own taxes? Okay, a few. That's complication. Okay? The IRS forms are complicated. They're not complex, they're just complicated. They do not work together in a more or less lawful interacting factors to form a system. It's just take line A, multiply it by line B, if and only if line C is equal to line D. But if line D is less than, what are you talking about? Okay? It's just complication. We don't want to complicate things. We don't want to emphasize complications, but we do want to cultivate complexity. He says, applied to humans, complexity, not complication principle, favors a division of labor, not a fragmentation of labor. It favors integrated actions in which the whole person is active, not mere reactions. It favors complex economies and integrated variety of means of living. So there are, I think, a lot of different ways to interpret this. We looked at with the next industrial revolution, when the authors were describing how the waste of one industry is actually incredibly beneficial and useful for another industry. So you have this complexity where, and I'm just making this up as I'm standing here, you have the spent grains from brewing beer that are then used for animal feed. And then the animal poo goes to be a fertilizer for the grains that are used to brew the beer again. It's this kind of zero waste approach to living. It's not complicated. I don't even know if it's necessarily complex, but it is a multiplicity of interacting functions that form a unity or a system. Another way is to look at it, a division of labor, not a fragmentation of labor, integrated actions in which the whole person is active. The way I look at this is, say I hire one of you to build a chair for me. I just say, I want you to build me a chair. You are responsible for finding the wood, sourcing the wood, for developing the plan for it, for cutting the wood and assembling it, making sure that it looks the way that you want it to look. It's almost as if it's an art project for you in a way. You are completely engaged as a full person. Your problem solving, your creativity, your manual labor, all of these are engaged in constructing that chair. Whereas if you work in a chair factory and you're responsible for screwing in the third bolt, you are fragmented. That labor is being fragmented. It's mind-numbing. It's boring. You are not being engaged as a full person. So what we need is we need this diversity of industries that work together to engage the full person, so that the full person can be committed to the end. Okay, the seventh one is local autonomy and decentralization. And I intentionally looked for pictures of hippie communes. Just that just looked delightful. I would love to live in a hippie commune. Especially if it was in the Northwest or Northern California. Local self-government and material and mental self-sufficiency. The idea is that, actually, I'll move. Local autonomy is strengthened by a reduction in the number of links in the hierarchical chains of decision. The idea is that we need to have control over our own lives. We need to have control over our own community itself. Think of, let's say if you wanted to, you see this vacant lot that you've decided would be a perfect location for a community garden. Organic vegetable garden that the community can go, they can rent plots of land in and they can plant whatever veggies they want. If we have local autonomy, we can maybe ask 2 or 3 people for permission. Like, yeah, sure, go ahead, throw it in. With this hierarchical decision making that we have, okay, well, you need to consult the local housing administration, and then you have to consult the county commission, and then you have to consult all of this stuff. These chains of decision get further and further removed from people who actually know what's going on, who actually care. The same thing is true with local environmental issues. Local environmental issues are perhaps better assessed by the people that live there than people somewhere in Washington, D.C. that have absolutely no interaction to it whatsoever. You'll probably recall in the Gary Snyder article, he wrote about touring I believe it was the Sierra Nevadas, with a senator, or congressman. And congressman, one response was, you mean there is a senator who's in charge of all of this? The awe, the wonder to think that this person who has absolutely no relation to the Sierra Nevadas, this person who has never even seen them, who never has no concept of what they are like, is making decisions about them somewhere in an office back east. What we need, according to the deep ecology movement, is we need to focus on what's truly important for ourselves. Okay, so those are the 7 elements of deep ecology, the deep ecology movement. Any questions on those? Okay, now we'll move on to the deep ecology platform, which is similar, but it is distinct. The deep ecology platform. The well-being and flourishing of human and non-human life on Earth has intrinsic value. The value of non-human life forms is independent of the usefulness they may have for narrow human interests. All things in the world have value, are important. Biosphere is too limited to capture all life on Earth. Deep ecology is meant to capture all things, including landscapes, rivers, mountains. All things have intrinsic value. The richness and diversity of life forms are values in themselves and contribute to the flourishing of human and non-human life. We need to preserve habitats, ecosystems, in order that these non-human animals can flourish. Their flourishing aids us in our own personal flourishing. Our lives are better because of the interactions that we have with the non-human world. Humans have no right to reduce this richness and diversity except to satisfy vital needs. Vital needs, those needs that are necessary for us to survive, which is very different from and distinct from material needs. Things like, needing a new pair of shoes to match the shirt you're wearing, or who knows what. Vital needs should be partially dictated by the ecosystem in which you are surviving. Speaking of shoes, there's a coffee shop that I like to go to in Salt Lake, and on the walls it has pictures of life in the different communities in which the coffee is sourced for the coffee shop. And there's this one picture that was taken in the South Pacific Islands, and it's just this picture of all of these kids in school uniforms running across a playground. The interesting thing about it, though, is they're all in the identical school uniforms, but none of them are wearing shoes, which is kind of fascinating when you think about it. Their society does not dictate that they are required to wear shoes. I mean, think of the playground that I had when I was in grade school was covered in pea gravel, okay? Because you have to mow pea gravel. I could not imagine not wearing shoes in that, or having to run across the asphalt or the concrete without wearing shoes. Our society, our environment dictates that we have certain needs.
Yeah, the one thing I hate is that how some, even elementary school parks, would have wood chips. And it's why would you have that? They could, if a child fell, they may get a wood chip in their skin. Yeah. So it's
You have to water or wood chips, it's a lot
Yeah, it's good, yeah.
environmentally friendly.
Yeah.
And,
Wait, I mean, I think in the West here, we have difficulty because we don't have a lot of rain, so we have to figure out alternatives. Because
Moss.
it's depending on the type of moss, yeah. I mean, it's just, you look at grass, you cannot keep grass green here. It's impossible. By June, it all looks brown and crusty and disgusting. But you gotta figure out something. Four, present human interference with the non-human world is excessive and the situation is rapidly worsening. Okay. The issue here is the extent to which and the way in which humans are interacting with the non-human world. We are required, just by living, to interact with the non-human world. This principle is not saying that we should not interact with the non-human world, but it's saying the way in which we are doing it is excessive and harmful. Number 5. And this will probably remind you of Garrett Hardin, but come on now, behave yourself. There we go. The flourishing of human life and culture is compatible with substantial decrease of the human population. The flourishing of non-human life requires such a decrease. As I said before, it was either 1 or 2 years ago in November that we finally surpassed 8 billion people on the planet. I showed you that graph of human population through time. We spent millions of years as Homo sapiens at less than 1 billion people. We hit the first billion sometime in the early 19th century. And from that point, it has been an exponential increase in the number of humans that live on the planet. We need to, according to the Deep Ecology Platform, make an effort to stabilize and reduce human population. Now, this is not saying we need to engage in genocide and start killing people. Number one, it wouldn't work anyway, because the net population gain, births minus deaths, is above 200,000 people per day. And there's no way you would be able to combat that increase. Exactly.
Which you're destroying the planet anyway.
Yes. So number one, it's logically not possible. Number two, it's ethically not possible. But it says that we need to stabilize the population. We need to decrease the number of people that are being born. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. Amartya Sen, that we looked at with a response to Garrett Hardin, argues in favor of education of women and the availability of birth control. And it is recognized that as women gain a form of independence, they have the ability to make decisions for themselves, that a lot of women choose to engage in things that they enjoy. Maybe getting an education, becoming a doctor, becoming a lawyer, instead of becoming a mother. significant change in life conditions requires a change in policies. These changes in policies are going to affect basic economics, technology, ideology. So our economic system is going to need to change if we want to move forward. Our technological systems are going to need to change if we are going to move forward. And our ideology, the way in which we perceive ourselves, has to change. Instead of perceiving ourselves as being these independent, autonomous agents, according to the deep ecology platform, we need to recognize how interconnected we are with everything around us. How the health of non-human systems and other human communities are vitally important for our own well-being. The ideological change is mainly that of appreciating life quality rather than increasing a higher standard of living. We looked at this when we were discussing voluntary simplicity with the Gamble and Cafaro article. We looked at this as well with Kate Soper's article. Looking at life quality, what truly gives us happiness, provides value for our lives, social interactions, leisure time, all of these things that are more important than a high standard of living. So looking at these 7 points, the 8th is a call to action. It says, those who subscribe to the foregoing points, those who agree with what we have said, have an ethical obligation to participate in the attempt to establish those changes. We have an obligation to do our part to make these changes that need to occur in order for us to live period, in order for us to live. The deep ecology, as I said at the beginning, is distinct from the other theories that we've looked at insofar as it is not utilizing any of the established ethical frameworks to argue in favor of environmental protection. This is going off in a new direction. This is saying that our current lifestyle, and our lifestyle being the way in which we live our lives, our technology, our economic system, our ideology, all need to change. Everything, in order for us to live successfully on this planet, the resulting state of affairs is going to be completely different from what it is right now. Our governing systems are going to be different. Our economic system needs to be different. All of these things need to change. And we need to work to make those changes. Okay. Thoughts? Questions? is basically deep ecology. We have, this is our last class. You have your final, sometime next week, I'm not sure when. Thursday? Thank you kindly.
When will you like add the questions for the final, for the final?
I will probably do that sometime on Tuesday or Wednesday. And then that will be locked, what was that?
Wait, we'll have more days for this one?
No, but it will be locked. I mean, when I add the questions, it will be locked. So right now, you can log in
Oh, I see what you mean.
and look at it. Can we just do that right now?
But we're not gonna know the questions until Thursday.
So it'd be like a normal celebration.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so right now, oh, you can't see that. Hold on a second. Keep changes. Yes, so right now you can log in and see everything. And then I will fill these in. I may or may not do two of the explaining concepts. I haven't decided yet. I'll actually ask you.
You should know.
You should not.
Just do one?
Just keep it like a normal celebration.
Okay.
There's two altogether.
No worries. I'll only do one then. But it is your final though, you know?
Exactly the same.
So it's not, you know.
But make it like the
I wanted to
same
make a real
difficulty as like the
celebration.
midterm.
Make
It's
a
like
real
the same
celebration
size.
though, you know, like, wow.
The real celebration would be getting done sooner so you can actually celebrate, and getting done sooner means.
Also, I have 2 other finals on Thursday.
Also, I work.
Yeah. I would like to not have my last day of the semester be myself crying to sleep.
And I'll be able to celebrate even harder.
That's what I
On the
mean.
one question,
Whoa.
rather than the 2.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Really celebrate.
That's.
So if you want us to celebrate.
I'm pretty sure quite a few of us would be celebrating, you know, having drinks in your honor if you just lowered it to
Yeah.
one question.
Oh, if you had drinks.
If you lower it, I will for sure have a drink in your honor.
I will.
Oh,
I'll
wow.
I'll even post a picture if you get extra credit.
I will take my first flush of mushrooms after you.
Oh. Are they, what kind of mushrooms, like oyster?
They're chestnut.
Chestnut, okay.
Yeah, no, this is one of the big things I got out of this class that inspired me to grow my own mushrooms.
That's something that I keep thinking to do, and then when I'm in a place to order the mushroom kits, I'm just never thinking about it.
What I'd recommend is there's some on Amazon that you order that is literally just, you rip off the thing, spritz it with water, and you just fruit
Oh, yeah.
Like a chia pet.
Like a chip. Mushrooms.
It's like a chia pet that boosts.
Okay.
I don't know where you have to. No, when I told my friend,
This
one of
guy's-
my friends, his first reaction is, so are you growing the fun kind of mushroom or the magic kind of mushroom? I was like, all mushrooms are magic.
All mushrooms.